Oh dear, we're doing something different.
You didn't finish your sentence. You mocked me.
Bet.
You shut up the boys. Jesus said something about before you get before God and pray, if you have aught with a brother, meaning a person, go and make peace with your brother, or forgive your brother before you get before God. Or, well, I don't know why I'm trying to paraphrase so miserably when I wrote it down on this handy-dandy piece of scratch paper. All right. Actually, what he said in Mark, chapter 11, verse 25 and 26, he said, "And whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive you your trespasses." It's much better if you hear what he really said. Well, I have a heavy heart, and I want to forgive someone's, before I get before the Lord and pray. When I was a teenager, in 1976, well, I was when my parents were teenagers, of course, my friend Stan Hauge brainwashed me into liking a band called Kiss. Because I was a little too sophisticated for Kiss. I was already a songwriter by then, and so I knew what a good song was and what a catchy song was, but I knew they weren't necessarily the same thing. And I was a huge David Bowie fan, so I already knew what a good performance looked like. But yeah, I got hooked on Kiss. And on August 20th, 1976, I saw Kiss in concert for the first time. And I became a lifer. And had I known that what feels like centuries later, there would be no real Kiss anymore, that there would be a touring band that had portions of Kiss and other guys dressed up like Kiss, more like the Harlem Globetrotters is what their last concert seemed like to me. And then Gene Simmons would become an internationally recognized buffoon on his reality show, only to culminate in a wedding ceremony that was embarrassing at best, followed by a wedding reception that included a band called Kiss playing at the wedding. A bunch of old guys in suits, and not the cool suits they wore prior to 1976 on the Dress to Kill album cover, but real suits that only old fading rock stars might think to wear, and bad wigs, and either bad facelifts or clumsy hip replacements, or well, Gene Simmons just looks like a dried up old prune. But if I had known that back in 1976, I might have stuck on a more sophisticated musical path. If I had known what I was going to see on TV the other day when I watched Gene Simmons get married. But seeing what's left of Kiss get up at a wedding and perform I Want to Rock and Roll All Night and Party Every Day, looking as they did, sounding as they did, and after what I watched for how many years of watching that dreadful TV show, which I am officially done with, I would like to say that I need to forgive Kiss. I need to forgive them, because I can't pray and stand before God and pray when I have someone that has wronged me that I need to forgive, or my Father in heaven won't forgive me. So I need to officially say, I forgive Kiss for not only aging poorly, but not only aging unfairly to the rest of the band, and to not even recognize that if you get up at your own wedding dressed as people who go to a wedding and perform rock and roll all night, you look exactly like the drunk people who get up at weddings wearing suits who sing a Kiss song at the reception. There's no difference. To bastardize the song I used in the 8th grade as my campaign song that I sung in front of the whole school to try to become the school treasurer, to see it bastardized to such a degree now, it was shameful. But I know that if I do not forgive them, then my Heavenly Father will not forgive me. And I want to publicly say that I totally forgive Kiss for aging poorly, screwing 2 people out of the band, having all the money in the world and still having bad wigs and horrible suits, and what's with the shoes? And lastly, playing your own song drunk at your own wedding. Blech. All right, I needed to say, God, I forgive Kiss for doing this, and I choose to remember Kiss for the amazing, powerful influence on my life and my music and my fashion and my sensibilities that they truly were, in Jesus' name. It takes a lot of work to forgive guys you don't even know. It takes a lot of work. That was a lot of work to spell that all out. And the thing is it really didn't exaggerate the circumstance or the effects of the circumstance on me. I mean, nothing tells you you're going to get old and die more than seeing Kiss get up at a wedding and perform badly. Nothing's worse than that. That was just horrible. I was like, wow, you guys are the one. You are the wedding party clearers when you do that. If you're at a wedding and someone gets up and they start singing with the band, it's time to leave. That's when the party has just ended. That's when they should stop serving. But in real life, forgiveness is a very challenging and painful process that involves recognizing the severity of the wrongdoing and the complexity of its effect on us. See, I was texting my friend Stan, who I haven't seen in decades, because he's in Indiana, while I was watching it, saying, you know, had I known this is how this was going to end, back then I would have slugged you in the mouth for turning me on to Kiss. And he's like, yeah, but what about all those years? And I said, well, they're coming crumbling down right now. I am very disappointed right now, very sad. But like I said, I choose, because that's all I can do. I can't change how I feel. I can't change how I reacted. But I can choose to say before God, these guys claim to be the greatest rock and roll band in the land. And they were absolutely that. There's no equal. No matter what happens. You know, maybe we need to retire from rock and roll sooner than we do. There is an argument for that. There's an argument against it. It's called Mick Jagger. That's the reality. Mick Jagger is still, I'm sorry, to me he still looks like he did, you know, back when I was a little kid. He hasn't changed a bit. Then there's Keith Richards that says maybe Mick Jagger should just retire so we don't have to keep looking at Keith Richards. I don't know. But it takes a lot to look at your heroes and your idols and say, they're going to disappoint me one day, the way my parents did, the way my friends did, the way my kids did, the way my whoever's did. How am I going to process this? Well, it's going to take some time. Did I lose any sleep over, Kiss and, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley and two guys whose names don't matter, performing Rock and Roll All Night at Gene Simmons' funeral? Wedding? No! I just got teary-eyed at the moment and said, this is a bad moment in history. A bad moment in history. I remember when they did Unplugged on MTV, which I think is the kiss of death for any band, and I cried through the whole thing because it was phenomenal and proved me wrong. But this was a bad day, and everybody has a bad day, but those bad days sure stick with us for a long time, and we struggle with forgiveness. Jesus said, and whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses. Oh, that's a real pain in the butt. Because I don't know about you, but I have a lot of people that have ticked me off over the years. I might never get to pray again if I have to go through this process for each one. It's a lot of people. I mean, first off, we started with, Kiss, and let's be fair, I love Kiss and all, but I'm going to get over this. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to put on Rock and Roll Over and forget this conversation ever took place, because it's still the best damn rock and roll album I own. But what about people who have really wronged me? What about people who have really hurt me? I'll tell you a story. It's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites, and I let this person know that I do name names when I tell this story, because I love telling this story, because this story needs to be told. And let me go back. I watch a lot of Law and Order. And the one thing I hear on Law and Order all the time is you have to come forward, you have to testify, or else you let this person do it again and again and again and again. Again and again and again and again. And there was not a Christian, there's not a church-going Christian, or a Christian that's ever set foot in a church in the world that wouldn't agree that to humiliate a human being at church to satisfy the lust of your flesh is spiritual rape. And it can be devastating to anyone who witnesses it, especially the person that it happens to. So, I gleefully have told this story before. I was asked to do a concert for an all-day event at Papago Park, which is here in Phoenix. And I performed at this event, and after I performed at this event, I met the church leader who put on the event, because I came in through a friend of mine who was performing. And she came up to me afterwards and says, "Oh my gosh, you're so amazing, Paisley. You're so anointed of God. What an amazing ministry you have." And I said, "Cool, let me come sing at your church sometime." She said, "Absolutely, call me and I'll schedule you." So she called me, so I called her and she scheduled me, and I showed up to perform at her church. And what I've always done, whenever I've performed at any church, is not as the person I show up as. If I change my clothes and get ready and put on my war paint, I make sure the last person who sees me before I do anything on their pulpit is the pastor. I've always done that. In this instance, I got dressed at home and drove there because it was very close by for me. So I went in and I sat down in the office with the minister, who was this woman. And I sat down in her office and we talked, just like friends. We talked like I was the guy she saw perform at Papago Park that she invited me to come to perform at her church. And then it was time for church to start. She prayed with me, gave me a big hug, thanked me for coming. Then we went in. Then after a bit of to-do, she asked me to come up and sing. I sang 5 songs, all of which I had performed at the Papago Park concert that she had seen. I was fabulous. As William Hung would say, I did my best. I did pretty good. It was just 5 songs, and you know, I made a few wisecracks here and there, which I always wondered if that's what set off the chain of events. But I always make wisecracks. I mean, I made them at Papago Park too. I didn't do anything really out of the ordinary for me. When I was finished, and I received standing ovation from a packed house, I took my seat in the back as the pastor came up to give her sermon. And she came up and she said, I'm not going to give my planned sermon today, because I believe today's the day that God wants to deal with Brother Paisley. And I was like, this is really, really bad what's about to happen. This is really bad what's about to happen. Because my equipment is over there. My CDs I was going to, give away afterwards over there. The door is all the way over there. The bathroom's right here, though. Maybe I could just right now get up and go to the bathroom and lock the door and wait an hour. So I don't hear the next sentence out of her mouth, because I felt such a welling up inside of me of what I had to say. So I'm simply going to say this before I continue the story. There has never been a moment in Paisley history that I have ever said anything short of, I totally respect and understand if anyone has a problem with how I do what I do. And they have every right to communicate that to me in a fashion that leaves space for peaceful conversation. So this is there's not a single chip on my shoulder that she didn't like my act. There's not a problem with that. I have no problem with that. In fact, I may expect that most of the time. But the Bible clearly teaches us that if you have a problem with a brother, the goal is to win the brother over. And the best way to do that is to approach him in meekness, humility, and prayer in private. And try to talk reasonably with him one-on-one, in hopes that by not embarrassing him, and being meek and humble and prayerful, he's going to see that you love him and that your motive is your concern for his soul, not your flesh. And if that doesn't work, meekly, humbly, prayerfully approach him with someone else at a later date. And if that doesn't work, you may have to bring them before the assembly. Well, we just skipped step 1 and 2 here, and we just decided to bring Paisley in front of the assembly and nail him at this event. And this woman said to me and her congregation, because it was one of those conversations that we all heard, and some of it was directed at me, and this was directed to them about me. But she walked around and said, yeah, today is the day that God is going to deal with Brother Paisley. Because Paisley thinks that because he's reaching homosexuals and drug addicts and prostitutes, it doesn't matter how he goes about it. But I want to make sure that I send a message to my entire congregation that I do not support his choice to present in this abomination of a fashion. And I would never want you kids who loved his music to ever look, act, or sound like this so-called man of God. So I'm thinking, how much should that equipment cost? How many CDs? How fast can I get out that door? Because the only thing I had left in me was rage. It was rage. Now, I will admit, I was embarrassed. I don't embarrass easy. And I don't think embarrass is the right word, because embarrass is when you are walking out of the bathroom and toilet paper stuck to your shoe and everyone's snickering and you can't run away from it and you're like blushing. I don't think that's what it was. But I was humiliated. I think this hurt as much as any pain I've ever felt in my life. To have someone talk about me like that with me sitting right there. She didn't say anything I haven't heard a million times. But I haven't heard it a million times from someone who invited me to come do that at their church just for the sole purpose of getting me when I was done. I mean, if you can't feel safe walking into a church that you're invited to, that you're not going to get spiritually mugged, where in life can you go? I think this messed with my perception of churchianity more than my entire life put together. Because it was just, you know, the icing on the same cake. It was the last straw. It was every final thing, because aside from them physically grabbing me and holding me down and performing an exorcism on me, what was left for them to do to me that day? What's left for any Christian to do to me other than assault me physically, perform an exorcism on me, or come to my house and kill me? And in all fairness, what is the difference between what she did? Because if I ever said, I'm really scared of going to perform at that church because I'm afraid they're tricking me to perform so they can nail me afterwards, people would roll their eyes and go, God, you're dramatic, Paisley. People don't do that. People wouldn't do, why would someone do that to you? That's stupid. They did. Talk about, you're not paranoid if it's really happening. I was going to say, talk about feeding my paranoia. There is no paranoia. It really happened. It wasn't the only time that's ever happened. It's happened. But boy, it didn't happen that day. And I don't know how much more I listened to at that point. I would tell you, as your friends, I would tell you in TV land, I would tell you as a man of God, anything that I did that day, if I'd done it, no God would convict me. So if I stood up and said, you are out of line, lady. You have no right to do this to me. You are humiliating a man of God, and you are taking it out on these children. And Jesus said, if you stumble them, and you are stumbling them, you are taking what you see in me as evil, and you're matching it with your own evil. I would have been justified. If I had stood up and I had said every four-letter word I know, today I would tell you, while not necessarily the most Christ-like choice, seriously, have you ever had that happen to you at church? Have you ever had this happen to you before? Well, until you walk in my combat boots, You don't know how you're going to react. If I walked up and socked her in the jaw and it weren't me and I heard the story, I may not let the person see me, but I'd go home and laugh about it. I said, good for you. You know what? I hope it made the papers that she did that and you did something about it. Well, that's the problem. I'm the one who says, I'm not justifying Columbine, but I sure understand how stuff like that happens. Teachers do this all the time. Parents do this all the time. Friends do this all the time. Churches do this all the time. Because if it happened once, it's happened a million times. There's no such thing as original sin, and I'm certainly not the first person that's had this happen to them before. Not in that room, and not in any room. So if we go back to, there's bullying in the home, there's bullying in the schools, there's bullying in the churches, everywhere, and if you're not safe, you're not safe. And no one's going to come to your defense, because no one came to my defense. No one said, hey, stop. No one did that. I was going to be eaten alive by someone who had set me up to jump me. Again, had I shown up doing something completely different, had I lied my way in, had I just sent a CD and no pictures, yeah. Maybe they're going to retaliate by saying, you show up like that, I'm not going to do this in private, I'm going to let everybody know what I thought of this. Still misguided, by the way. That's not God. God never says, do this in a fashion to knock as many people down as possible when you could do it in private and win over a soul. God never does that. So this has nothing to do with the leading of the Holy Spirit. So, what I did do is, I left my equipment, I left my CDs, I worked my way to the door, which of course was impossible to get to for all the people, while she continued talking about me. And I got to the door and a big man stopped me. And I said, who are you, sir? And he said, I'm her husband. And I said, I should walk up there and punch her in the mouth. But she's not dumb enough to stand in the doorway when I'm trying to leave gracefully. You might want to move, sir. And he said, did you just threaten me? No. I said, no. A threat would be something that I may not follow through on. I fired a warning. I need to get out of this building now. You don't want to stand in my way. So he moved out of my way. He followed me outside. And he said, you're really mishandling. That's all I remember him saying. I turned around and said, sir, you are her husband. And you watched what she just did to me. You do not speak to me. Ever. Not a word. Not a word. I said, you should be ashamed of yourself. You watched me get set up and jumped and raped. And you stood around and watched. You stood around and watched. And you think the only choice you have is to follow me out here and threaten me and tell me I did something wrong. I said, sir, don't speak to me. Not a word. Not one sound. This will go so different than you wanted to if I hear the sound of your voice right now. Then a third person came out. And it was a young lady. And she handed me 20 bucks. She said, Pastor wants you to have this for coming out today. And I turned to her and I said, I'm going to tell you, you may be the stupidest person I've ever met in my life. That you actually allow someone to put you up to this. I said, you stood there and saw what just happened in that room. And you did nothing. And both of you know it was wrong. she has every right to be in disagreement with me, my life, my lifestyle, my work, how I present.